I'm Daisy Ellis, 28 years old, and my family has always treated me like a shadow. My brother, the pampered son, is a successful lawyer, never making a mistake. As for me, I did everything I could to keep the family together, sacrificing my dreams and always striving to make them proud. But it wasn't enough for them. They would smile at my brother, patting him proudly on the back, while I received only cold stares and biting words. "Why can't you be like him?" they would say, their voices piercing me like razor blades. I kept everything bottled up, kept quiet, believing that one day they would see me. Then my brother's wedding approached. I was tasked with making everything perfect, attending to every detail, and ensuring that nothing went wrong. I thought maybe, just maybe, they would notice me this time. But I was wrong. The night before the wedding, we sat around the dinner table. My brother demanded more extravagant bands and imported bouquets of flowers, things I couldn't afford. I refused. That's when my parents exploded. Their words were a shock I hadn't expected. "The greatest gift for your brother's wedding is for you to disappear from this family forever," they said. Silence fell over the room. My chest tightened, but I didn't beg. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and left. The door closed behind me, a final, decisive blow. The wedding day arrived. Everything seemed perfect until it all fell apart. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed to witness this day, or would you have left forever? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your answer. Years ago, I was a freelance marketer with big dreams. I'd just landed a $40,000 contract with a major supermarket chain to redesign their regional advertising campaign. It was my chance for independence, a chance to build a name for myself in a highly competitive industry. But suddenly, our family grocery store in Erie, Pennsylvania, hit rock bottom. Bills piled up, suppliers stopped calling, and my parents were drowning in debt. My mom's voice broke on the phone as she begged me for help. My usually composed dad admitted they might lose everything. I couldn't let that happen. So I walked off the contract. I called the supermarket's representative, canceled the deal, and did everything I could to save our store. I built a marketing campaign from scratch, ads on local radio stations, flyers in every mailbox, and even early social media posts on rudimentary platforms. I negotiated with suppliers, won over customers, and drastically cut costs. Within months, our customer base doubled. Store revenue soared, and we paid off our worst debt. I was working at night editing logos and designing posters, thinking that this would finally make them see me. But that didn't happen. One evening, my mother, Eleanor Reed, and my father, Walter Reed, called a family meeting. I expected some gratitude, perhaps a nod of appreciation for their efforts in saving us. But instead, they handed the reins of the store to my brother, Derek Ellis. "He's a lawyer," my mother said, her eyes shining with pride. "He has the right mindset for the job." Derek, who hadn't lifted a finger during those months at the law firm, was now in charge. My father nodded, avoiding my gaze. "That's for the best," he said. I stood there, stunned, my chest heaving. Derek smiled wryly, adjusting his tie, already planning changes to my campaign. "So, how did you do, Daisy?" he said condescendingly. Yes, I had saved their legacy. I had sacrificed my future. But to them, I was just a stand-in, the one who filled the gaps. My mother continued to praise Derek's vision, as if my work meant nothing. My father didn't even lift his head from his coffee. I wanted to scream and demand they acknowledge what I'd done, but I didn't. I swallowed my pain, forced a smile, and kept working. I stayed up all night at the store, rearranging shelves, updating the advertisements, doing anything to remain useful. I told myself they'd notice eventually. If I worked harder, proved myself more, they'd see my worth. Maybe at a family dinner, Mom would finally say, "You saved us." Maybe Dad would pat me on the shoulder, not Derek's. Marcus Wood, my best friend since college, knew I was lying. We'd meet at a restaurant, and he'd shake his head at my stories. One night, as he sipped his coffee, he said, "They're blind, Daisy. You're exhausting yourself for people who don't care about you." I ignored him, but his words stuck. I couldn't stop hoping, I couldn't give up. I was trying to earn their respect. So, I kept working hard in their world, believing that someday they would appreciate me. The store thrived thanks to my efforts. The aisles filled with customers, the checkout machines were back up, and the suppliers returned. But every time I walked in, I saw Derek's name on the manager's office door. My parents would call him to discuss strategy while I restocked the shelves. My mother said once, absent-mindedly, as if I'd mopped the floor, not saved their store, "Well done." Derek would rush in, throwing around ideas I'd already implemented, and they'd nod as if he'd come up with them himself. I kept waiting for a word of thanks, a real one. I kept thinking, maybe next time, maybe if I tried harder, they'd see me as more than just a little kid. So I kept walking, ignoring the pain in my chest, hoping for the day they'd finally say I was enough. Months later, I was engrossed in planning my brother's wedding. Derek was about to marry his fiancée, Chloe Newman, and my parents had entrusted me with making it a success. They hadn't asked if I had the time or the money. They simply expected me to get the job done. I was a freelancer in marketing, struggling to make ends meet, but I used $10,000 of my savings to cover payments to service providers, from the venue to everything else. I wanted everything to be perfect, not for Derek, but to prove I could deliver something they would appreciate. I spent weeks calling caterers, florists, and photographers, meticulously checking every detail. I selected a menu of roast chicken, garlic, mashed potatoes, and summer salads to fit the budget. I met with suppliers in Erie, haggled to cut costs, and double-checked contracts to avoid mistakes. But Derek had other ideas. He didn't just want a wedding. He wanted a spectacular one. Get a quartet from Pittsburgh, he demanded one morning over breakfast, scrolling through his phone. And those rare flowers from abroad. Chloe saw them in a magazine. I explained that the budget was tight, and my savings were gone. He rolled his eyes. You always take shortcuts, Daisy. Do what you want. My mother, Eleanor, chimed in, sipping her coffee. He's right. It's his day. Don't ruin it. My father, Walter, just nodded, flipping through his newspaper. Their words were hurtful, but I pressed on, hoping that a perfect wedding would finally earn their respect. I worked late into the night, emailing suppliers and adjusting plans. I found a local band willing to play for less. I booked regular roses instead of imported ones. Every choice was carefully calculated to balance Derek's demands with reality. But he kept pressing. One day, he called, insisting on hiring a famous DJ from Cleveland. It's only a few thousand more, he said, as if it were nothing. I reminded him that I would be covering half the wedding costs myself. Figure it out, he snapped, hanging up. Eleanor overheard our conversation and shook her head. Why don't you just do what he wants? She asked. Jeffrey glanced at me and muttered, Don't mess it up for him. I felt ignored, as if my efforts were invisible. I had spent hours coordinating, sacrificing my own projects to make their vision a reality. Yet they criticized every move. During a family lunch, Eleanor pointed out a typo in the draft invitation I showed her. Careless, she said, tossing it aside. Derek grinned. That's typical Daisy. I wanted to snap back and tell them how much I was footing the bill, but I held my tongue. I continued to adjust the seating chart and confirm deliveries, hoping they would recognize the effort being made. Marcus, I realized how exhausting this was. We met at a cafe in Erie one evening, and I talked about Derek's endless demands. Now he wants a custom-made ice sculpture, I said, sounding worn out. Marcus leaned forward, his voice firm. Daisy, you're overreacting to people who don't appreciate you. Stand up for yourself. I shrugged, stirring my coffee. If I can pull this off, maybe they'll finally see me. He shook his head, unconvinced. They wouldn't. You deserved more than their approval. But I couldn't stop. I kept working, calling the venue daily, making sure the tablecloths were perfect. I ordered the cake. I even put in an extra deposit to secure a backup generator, just in case. My savings were dwindling, but I convinced myself it was all worth it. If I could give Derek his perfect day, maybe Eleanor would smile at me for once. Jeffrey might say something other than, Don't mess it up. I put all my effort into the wedding, thinking it was my chance to shine. Derek's demands kept escalating. Once, he sent me a link to a fine dining service, insisting on caviar as an appetizer. I called him, explaining that it would be beyond our budget. You're embarrassing me, he said coldly. Eleanor overheard our conversation when she visited the house and sighed. Just do what he asked, Daisy. It's not that difficult. Walter nodded, his eyes still glued to the television. I was humiliated by their refusal, but I pressed on, adjusting the plans, hoping the wedding would change their perception of me. The night before the wedding, I sat at our family dinner table in Erie, the air thick with tension. My mom had prepared her usual roast beef, but no one was eating. Derek leaned back in his chair, scrolling through his phone while his fiancée, Chloe, tapped on her plate. My dad sipped his wine, barely looking up. I'd spent months planning Derek's wedding, pouring $10,000 of my savings into it. But tonight was different, like a storm was brewing. I steeled myself, hoping for a peaceful evening. Derek broke the silence. Without looking up, he said, Daisy, we need to improve the menu. Add lobster tails and Old Napa champagne. Oh, and hire that photographer from Pittsburgh who shot the governors. I stared at him, my fork frozen. Lobster tail champagne costs $500 a bottle. And a photographer charges $3,000 a day. I have already exhausted my savings to the maximum extent to cover half the cost of the wedding. Derek, I said firmly, I can't. I paid for everything, the venue, the band, the flowers. I'm out of money. He sneered, throwing his phone on the table. You're always so stingy, Daisy. This is my wedding. Make it happen. Eleanor slammed her glass down, her eyes narrowing. He's right, she said. This is a once-in-a-lifetime day. Why are you being so selfish? Walter's gruff voice rose. Don't ruin this for your brother. My chest tightened, and their words stung more than I'd expected. I'd given it all, my time, my money, my energy, and they still saw me as the problem. I tried to explain. I spent $10,000 of my savings. The budgets were stretched to the limit. We couldn't afford lobsters or a celebrity photographer. Derek rolled his eyes, leaned over to Chloe and said, "See? I told you she'd be stingy." Chloe remained silent, avoiding my gaze. Eleanor folded her arms and spoke sharply. "You've always been like this, Daisy, never taking the initiative when it matters." Walter nodded, adding, "Derek deserves better than your lukewarm efforts. I worked sleepless nights, haggled with vendors, and made their dream wedding possible, but for them it meant nothing." I lowered my voice, then raised it. "I paid half the costs of this wedding. I did everything you asked. I can't keep spending money I don't have on this." Derek grinned, shaking his head. "Then maybe you shouldn't be involved at all," he said. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes cold. "You know what, Daisy? The greatest gift for your brother's wedding would be for you to disappear from this family forever." Silence fell over the room. Jeffrey didn't flinch. He just stared at his plate. Chloe shifted, uncomfortably silent. My heart pounded, the echo of their words reverberating like a slap. Disappear. After everything I'd done, I wanted to scream and list every sacrifice I'd made. But their faces, Eleanor's sharp gaze, Walter's indifference, Derek's smug smile, told me it wouldn't matter. They'd chosen him again. I stood up, their words almost hitting the floor. "Fine," I said, my voice low but firm. "If that's what you want." I grabbed my purse, my keys jingling in my hand. She called after me, "Eleanor, don't make a fuss, Daisy." But I wasn't listening anymore. I walked out the door and slammed it shut behind me. The sound was sharp and decisive. Outside, the terrifyingly cold air brushed against my face, but inside, I felt a fire burning. I had given them everything, my savings, my time, my hope, and they had thrown it all back in my face. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, my thoughts racing. They wanted me gone. Fine, but I wasn't going to give up quietly. I had spent months building their perfect day, only to be told in the end that I was the problem. Enough. I wasn't sure what I would do next. But one thing was clear. I was sick of being a tool in their hands. I started the engine. My resolve grew stronger. Tomorrow they would see what would happen when I stopped carrying their burdens. The next morning, I woke up with their words still ringing in my ears. I sat on my bed, staring at my phone, the savings app open. $10,000, my entire savings, had been frozen as deposits for Derek's wedding. The caterers, the florists, the band, they'd all paid out of my pocket to make their day perfect. But after last night's dinner, their demand that I disappear forever had changed everything. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I started calling the service providers. First, the caterer. "Cancel the order," I said firmly. "I'll get my deposit back." The woman on the phone hesitated, asking about penalties, but I didn't care. Then the florist. "No flowers, no arrangements. Give me my money back," I told her. The band was the last I called. They'd cashed the check, but I demanded a refund. By noon, I'd gotten most of the $10,000 back, leaving the wedding completely empty. No flowers, no music, no food. I didn't feel guilty, I felt determined. They wanted me gone. I'll give them a wedding they'll never forget. By noon, chaos reigned. Guests arrived to find empty tables. No band playing, no bouquets in sight. Lindsay, Derek's fiancée, Lindsay, stood in her wedding dress, stunned, while relatives whispered amongst themselves in confusion. Derek, his face flushed, yelled at the venue staff, who had no answer. Eleanor called me, her voice sharp. "Daisy, what have you done? You've ruined everything." Jeffrey left a message too. His tone was cold. "You're a disgrace to this family." I didn't return their calls. Their accusations didn't affect me. I'd heard enough. That evening, Derek turned to an online forum, a local, eccentric gossip forum. "My sister ruined my wedding," he posted, his words dripping with venom. "She's jealous, spiteful, and she's ruined the best day of my life." He portrayed me as the villain, claiming I'd deliberately sabotaged his big day. The comments poured in, some from neighbors I've known for years, calling me selfish and crazy. Eleanor commented on Derek's post, saying, "She's always been a troublemaker." Walter didn't comment, but I knew he agreed. Their lies spread like wildfire, twisting the truth to save face. I sat in my apartment reading the posts, my stomach churning. Part of me wanted to respond and reveal how I'd financed half of their dream wedding. How they'd asked for more than I could give. But what good would it do? They'd never admit their mistake. Instead, I opened my laptop and started looking for apartments in Asheville, North Carolina. I'd been there once. I loved the quiet mountains, that new beginning they'd promised. Erie meant nothing to me anymore, just a family who saw me as surplus. I called a real estate agent to ask about available apartments. Something small, I told myself. I'd start over. Marcus walked by that night, his face grim. "They're smearing you online," he said, showing me Derek's post on his phone. "Are you okay?" I nodded, though my hands were shaking. "It's over between us," I told him. He didn't press me. He just sat with me while I packed some boxes, closed books, and got my laptop. He said, "You're stronger than they think." Before he left, his words lingered in my mind, like a tiny anchor in a storm. By midnight, I'd booked a one-way bus ticket to Asheville for the following week. The wedding's collapse was their fault. They'd pushed me to the limit. Eleanor's voicemail came flooding back, her voice blaming me for embarrassing them. Walter's cold tone echoed, calling me a disgrace. Derek's post, with its lies, hit me harder than all of that. But I wasn't staying to fight their version of events. I'd given them everything, my money, my energy, my hope, and they'd squandered it all. Now I was the one who chose. After weeks of chaos, I stood in my small, desolate office, packing up what little I had left. I'd built a modest freelance marketing business over the years, a side hustle that barely provided for me. It wasn't much, just a rented room with a desk, a computer, and a few client files. But it was mine. I decided to sell it. A local agency offered me $25,000 for my client list and contracts. I signed the papers without hesitation, pen firmly in hand. That sum, plus the $10,000 I'd saved from my wedding, was my way out. I also made an even harder decision. For years, I'd dedicated myself to the family grocery store, first with a marketing campaign that saved it, then with a $5,000 investment of my savings to keep it afloat. I managed the inventory, negotiated with suppliers, and balanced the accounts, but after they betrayed me, it was all over. I called the bank and withdrew my entire investment. I didn't call Eleanor or Walter to warn them. They made their decision when they asked me to disappear. Without my money and management, the cracks in the store that I had been repairing for years would widen. By the end of the month, I was on a bus to Asheville, North Carolina. My belongings were crammed into 2 bags, clothes, a laptop, and a few books. The mountains loomed majestically from the window, their serene promise drawing me forward. I rented a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, just a single bedroom with a view of the Blue Ridge Peaks. The first night, I sat on the bare floor eating takeout, feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Erie was gone. Eleanor, Walter, Derek, and their toxicity too. The family store didn't last long after I left. Marcus kept sending me updates via text, his messages harsh. Suppliers stopped delivering when payments were delayed. Customers dwindled, the store shelves empty. Derek, who had taken over, made every decision wrong. Eleanor tried to step in, but she couldn't handle the logistics I was managing. Walter simply quit, blaming everyone else. Within weeks, the store declared bankruptcy and closed its doors permanently. Marcus wrote, "They're falling apart without you." I didn't reply. Their failure was no longer a burden on me. In Asheville, I started over. I worked freelance marketing jobs, small jobs for local shops, and designed ads for coffee roasters and stores. The work was steady, and my skills were honed by years of hard work. At first, I was reserved, wary of new faces, but the city's warmth drew me in. One morning, I walked into a bakery downtown, drawn in by the smell of freshly baked bread. Diane Bennett, the owner, greeted me with a big smile. She was in her 50s, her apron covered in flour, and her laughter filled the room. "You look new here," she said, passing me a free scones across the counter. We started talking. I told her I'd just moved, skipping over the complicated details. She wasn't intrusive. She shared her own stories, how she'd founded the bakery after her divorce and rebuilt it from scratch. "It takes courage to start over," she said with a kind look. She invited me to a meeting with local business owners and introduced me to shopkeepers who needed marketing help. Thanks to her, I gained 2 clients that week. Diane became an integral part of our morning coffee sessions at her bakery, where we would chat about life, and her constant presence gave me a sense of stability. I hadn't heard from Eleanor or Walter. Derek had sent an angry email accusing me of ruining the family business. "You're selfish," he wrote, as if I hadn't kept it alive for years. I deleted the email without replying. Chloe kept quiet, probably because she was caught up in Derek's whirlwind. I remembered Marcus's words from Erie. "You're stronger than they think." He was right. In Asheville, I wasn't the shadow I had been in Erie. I was building something new. Clients, relationships, a life that felt like my own. One evening, Diane invited me to her bakery after work. We sat with cups of tea, the aroma of cinnamon rolls filling the air. "You look different," she said. I settled in, nodding, realizing I hadn't thought about Erie in days. For the first time, I felt at ease, as if I could breathe without carrying their expectations. Asheville was my new beginning, and with Diane's help, I was finding my place. I wasn't looking back. Months later, Asheville became my refuge. But the fallout from Erie still lingered. The family grocery store, once the heart of my parents' world, was gone. Its shuttered windows were a symbol of their collapse. Eleanor and Walter faced a harsh new reality. Their savings dwindled, forcing them to sell their house and move into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of Erie. Neighbors who had once welcomed them warmly now avoided their gaze, their reputation tarnished by the store's demise. Derek fared no better. His charm, once enough to win people over, could no longer mask his mismanagement. He'd taken a job at a hardware store, but customers whispered about his role in the family's downfall. His ego had lost its power. His fiancée, Chloe, had quietly broken up with him, and everything had crumbled under the weight of their failures. The life they had built on false glory had collapsed. I paid no attention to their suffering. My focus was on Asheville, a place where I could rebuild my life without it casting a shadow over me. My freelance marketing business was starting to take root. I had secured contracts with 5 local businesses: a brewery, a bookstore, an art gallery, a coffee shop, and a camping gear store. My days were filled with logo design, copywriting, and pitching marketing campaigns over coffee in bustling downtown cafes. My monthly income was around $3,000, enough to cover my modest apartment and a few simple luxuries like attending a concert or buying a new pair of walking shoes. I felt that each project was a building block in the life I was constructing for myself. Marcus's presence remained constant, even from miles away. He would call every few weeks, his warm voice tumbling over the phone. "Ari isn't the same without you," he said once, laughing, "but you're doing great out there." He would send photos of his latest woodworking projects, token gifts that kept our friendship alive. His encouragement reminded me of a strength I'd forgotten. The baker was undoubtedly my pillar of support in Asheville. Her shop, with its comfortable wooden tables and the aroma of freshly baked pastries, was where I would brainstorm or unwind after long days. She would give me a free muffin, saying, "Feel to keep going." Her simple, unwavering belief in me helped me see myself as more than just the daughter I was never meant to be. Then came Eleanor's letter. It arrived on a cold morning, her handwriting shaky on the envelope. She claimed to have been diagnosed with a serious illness and begged me to return to Erie to help her and Walter rebuild their lives. Her words were heavy with guilt, portraying me as the key to their salvation. I read it twice and my stomach churned. Diane, wiping her desk, saw my face and asked what was wrong. I handed her the letter. She glanced at it quickly, frowning. "This reeks of manipulation," she said, tossing it aside. "People don't change overnight." Her candor dispelled my doubts. I'd seen Eleanor's tactics before, exploiting pity to manipulate others. Marcus, when I called him, agreed. "She's trying to win you back," he said. "Don't fall for it." I wasn't. I wrote one short, final reply. "I wish you a speedy recovery, but I'm not coming back." I sent the reply and blocked their numbers. Cutting ties with them hadn't been easy. Part of me still longed for the family I'd envisioned for them. But I knew that remaining entangled in their chaos would only undermine the peace I'd found. Diane nodded when I told her, her eyes brimming with pride. "You're choosing yourself," she said, pouring me coffee. "That's the hardest and bravest thing to do." Marcus echoed her words in his next call. "You're free now. Don't look back." Their unwavering, genuine support had given me the courage to let go. In Asheville, I wasn't just building a career. I joined a local hiking group, trekking trails like Black Balsam Knob, where the mountains stretch endlessly in breathtaking wilderness. I returned to painting, a hobby I'd abandoned in Erie, filling my sketchbooks with watercolor landscapes. My apartment became a haven for plants on the windowsill, a rug from a local market, and a shelf full of books I found time to read. I landed a big contract with a regional tourism board, a 6-month advertising campaign that doubled my income. The work was hard, but every night I spent revising slogans was proof of my worth. One evening, I sat in Diane's bakery with Diane and some of her regular customers, laughing about Asheville's iconic festivals. A customer stopped by to thank me for a campaign that had boosted his store's traffic. I smiled, feeling a warmth I'd never known in Erie. I learned a lesson that stuck with me. My worth isn't tied to what I do for Eleanor, Walter, or Derek, but to the life I create for myself. The clients who trust me, the friends who support me, and the quiet moments when I feel complete. Asheville wasn't just a new beginning. It was where I learned to stand tall, not for anyone else, but for myself.
अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा बेसर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना अब बहुत ही दूर भरता है अंधेरी दीवारों में खुद को ढूंढता हूँ मैं ये जो दिन सुहाने थे उन्हीं को सोचता हूँ मैं तुम्हारे बिन ये मौसम भी बड़ा सर्द लगता है दिल का हर एक कोना बहुत ही दर्द भरता है सितारों से भी पूछता है पता तेरा कहाँ होगा, मगर खामोश है दुनिया, कहाँ मेरा जहाँ होगा। बस एक बार मुड़ के देख ले मेरी बेबसी की सूरत, मुझे है